Beep, 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 beep. Morning all. Jester here. How are we? I hope you're all all well. Tremendous evening with the team last night, the Warrior Teacher team. Our 2-hour session went on for free because there was so much to discuss and so much to unpack. And so much going on. Lots of people doing different things. It was great to hear about some of the stuff, some of the activism, and some of the work being done in the midst of a strange and funny time where we've had Cass that I was very angry about the other night. I'm probably wrong, by the way. People have been saying to me, listen, consider. And what about? And ooh, what if? Right? So don't panic, right? I was angry when I did that. I feel like I'm apologising to my wife. Right? No, I was angry when I did that. But, you know, things may be better than I thought. I've also got to meet with the head of one of the organisations that is working in this field in the era of psychology, and that was terribly interesting as well. So some conversation there around WPATH. So I'm going to do a bit about WPATH today. Right? Okay, nothing major, but I found a nice article that I thought was worth us going through. So do the usual, please subscribe if you can. Send me a coffee. Buy me a coffee. Substack's now going. Patreon, but the usual, right? Or become a Warrior Teacher. Come on, folks. Ooh, it's looking good. Become a Warrior Teacher. So we've got a new lot starting now, and then they'll be beginning their first lesson in January. If you'd like to be considered for January, you need to tell me today, right? If you want to be considered for February, I'll start making noises about that after Christmas because I'm tired, right? And I'm going to have a break from the 16th. Anyway, let's go. Let's move straight in. I started pre-marking. Have you noticed? Because people get angry when I'm doing that. So I'm just going to pre-mark. Right, so this is an article that I've got. I've put it down into the doobries, into the description for you, so you've got the link at the bottom of the description as usual. But let us begin. What it says here is one of the many public relations strategies, or main public relations strategies of gender-affirming care, is to deny the model of treatment being used in American clinics differ in any significant way within that ones now used in European clinics. So this is a comparator here between the American experience, which is this primarily interested in, and what's happening in Europe, which is in fact fine, although they make no differentiation between Europe and the UK, because there are significant differences between what the UK is doing and Europe is doing. That's interesting in itself. So what we've got here is that they're saying that over the past two years and following systematic reviews of evidence, both the health authorities in Sweden and Finland, and now in the UK, have agreed that no evidence exists, no evidence exists that the benefits of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones outweigh the risk. Colour me surprised. Colour me surprised. Screwing with children's bodies, doesn't it? You know. Sorry, but no, doesn't work. Isn't it horrendous that we need studies to show that? Yeah, really hard. So what's happened is WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, whose roots we need to look at very, very closely. Very closely, okay? Which is they're a US-based promoter of gender affirmation. Do you remember the ones that recognised eunuchs now? They want to, if somebody's a eunuch, you affirm them. No balls, these people. Right, so, okay. They've sort of conceded something, which is a massive, right? Massive. So what we've got is this particular organisation have responded to the NHS draft guidance, which was released back in October, and on a February report by the former president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. In that report, physician Hilary Cass, who I lambasted so badly the other day, I feel guilty about that, how awful. Hilary Cass noted the affirmative model, speechy things, which originated in the USA, speechy things. What? Hey, colour me surprised. It's like it all comes from the USA. Who stole it from France? What? Yep, it does all come from the USA. As likely responsible for insufficient child safeguarding at the now discontinued Tavistock Clinic Gender Service. Get it? Cass is saying, quite clearly, that the affirmation model is a safeguarding problem. Okay? Because this needs a safeguarding framework, as we saw when Miriam Cates tried to diligently expose this with the absolutely execrable education personage on the video which we saw in the last couple of days, again down in the Dubras. Cass also wrote that Tavistock staff have told us that they feel pressure to adopt an unquestioning affirmative approach and that this is at odds with the standard process of clinical assessment and diagnosis that they have been trained to undertake in all other clinical encounters. Can you imagine the situation where, no matter what the clinical situation was, whatever the person told you was the truth? This is the lived experience trumps scientific fact garbage dumpster. That's what it is, right? So that's at odds, really, with how you would diagnose anything. I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely mad. So people have been trained to do it the proper way, and they're finding themselves in situations where they've been told they've got to do it that way, which is just nuts, right? So in November 25th statement, WPATH condemned the NHS in terms that reveal the organisation's strong preference for the affirmative model. NHS, we condemn you, okay? The NHS, it complained, is emphasising careful exploration of a child or young person's coexisting mental health, neurodevelopmental and or family or social complexities. Good, right? Which WPATH have deemed that kind of exploratory... What's going on in your life? I've said this before. Gender identity doesn't exist. Tell me what's going on in your life. WPATH have deemed as an alarming practice of outdated gatekeeping. Gobsmacking. Gobsmacking. The problem we've got here, that there is public confusion about gender affirming care, and that's not being helped by people on the nutjob side, right? Which arises from the difficulties they have with protocols and definitions. Colour me surprised, we're again here with this idea that language is being obfuscated and knowledge is being twisted in order to achieve an ideological ends, that of the creation and maintenance of the myth of the trans child. It's just madness. Right, so what they're saying is here, you see, with the Dutch approach, which is the European nations model, are now implementing, and the US model, the experience of one's gender as different one's sex, i.e. is a natural, normal and healthy variation of human development. They're both saying gender identity exists. The Dutch protocol and the American protocol both saying that, even though the approach is so different from both of them. The American protocol being, oh my God, you're wonderful, give me your breasts, right? That's me being crass, right? Very, very crass, right? Okay. The Dutch protocol being watchful waiting. Both believe that the idea of gender identity exists. This is cobblers. It doesn't exist. Okay. Nor does gender dysphoria. It's distress. We don't know what the distress is. It's a child in distress. Individualised care. Yeah. So from the fact that you've got those two different models that at their root are saying, oh yeah, gender identity exists, right? You have a number of divergences, and in the article they talk about three, so let's just quickly have a look at those. Social transition. Iatrogenic, I believe Cass called it. The use of new names and pronouns, as well as restrooms and sports teams. According to the affirmative model, as clarified by the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2018, gender identity is knowable from a very early age, and once declared, a child's gender identity calls for immediate and uncritical affirmation by parents, peers, clinicians and teachers. That's what I'm going to start calling the Ehrenschaft model, because that's Diane Ehrenschaft in full flow. Her of the satanic panic and other child abuse nonsense from years ago. It's always the same people that keep floating to the surface, like those turds you can't flush. Right. This contrasts starkly with the Dutch model, which, drawing on decades of research, acknowledges that gender dysphoria in children is very likely to persist. Yeah, that's because it's not a thing. Usually by adolescence or early adulthood, in many cases resolving into faggotry, puffery, all manner of shirt lifting. Yeah, homosexuality. Right? It was always boys before we had the social contagion. Always. Okay? So that's, you know, the Dutch model goes for watchful waiting. The American model's like, you know, gung-ho. Are you surprised? Gung-ho, let's go for it. The Dutch team now don't even recommend social transition, but they're still saying that gender identity exists. Okay, that's the problem. And England's NHS strongly advises against childhood social transition and recommends it for adolescents only, based on informed consent, with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, which I still don't think exists. I think it's just distress of some kind. This goes on to talk about that. This is a very good article, by the way. So that what they're saying here is behind these differing recommendations on social transition are diverging assumptions about the etiology of gender identity. Where did it come from? What is it? What's it mean at its root? That's what they're saying. This is the second of the disagreements. The proponents of the affirmative model tend to believe that it's a strong neurological component. Gobblers. There's no pink brain and blue brain. What nonsense. No evidence supports this. What a surprise. Studies on brain structure and functioning are notoriously inconclusive, mainly because they cannot control for, yes, you've guessed it, faggotry, puffery, and all manner of shirt lifting. Me. They'd have trans me. That's what they're doing to young gay kids. They're transing them. Right. The other side of it, the affirmative approach, remember both of these still believe that gender identity exists. The affirmative approach are quite happy to make this an analogy to gay rights. So trans people are just going through what gay people are going through. And there's a guy that does this online, a guy called Jack Turban. Every time he brings out some nonsense, it's debunked thoroughly by those who are far cleverer in this field than I am. He actually said that gender was fluid and not fixed, to which some wag replied on Twitter, then why the fuck are we cutting kids up? Which is a very good question. To which he promptly responded by deleting the tweet, which is, I believe, form for Dr. Jack Turban. Essentially, the affirmation model, they think that gender identity is natural and immutable, yep, as being cisgender, yep, right, which isn't a thing. I'm not a subset of men, right? So I'm not a subset, I am a man. Okay, it's not complicated. But the Dutch researchers themselves put it over just over a decade ago. The pathobiological basis of gender dysphoria is poorly understood, and its diagnosis relies totally on psychological methods. It's not understood. It doesn't exist. You are looking for a black cat in a darkened room, and there's no cat there. That's what you're doing, okay? Just insane. So there's new evidence that's coming up now. We've got, there's all sorts coming out, actually. The original Dutch model, 100% of the people were homosexual. 100% of the original transition people. Butchers, see? The likely possibility that many teens were identifying as transgender and seeking irreversible medical interventions because of social influences prompted European health authorities to conduct evidence reviews and scale back the administration of hormones, which they have done. Among US practitioners, however, social influence-based explanations remain strictly verboten. One will not talk about it. No, my dear, it's simply not done. In their brief for a particular American case called Ekins Tucker versus Marshall, the lawsuit challenging Alabama's ban on affirmative drugs and surgeries, 18 American medical groups wrote that there is no reliable evidence supporting the social influence hypothesis. They are living in cloud cuckoo land. I've spoken to young people it's happened to. They're living in cloud cuckoo land. However, in its updated standards of care, WPATH acknowledges susceptibility to social influence as potentially relevant to a select subgroup of young people in forming a sense of self. Do you think they sense which way the wind be a-blowing? It's possible, It's possible. Now, it also mentions here what we know from Cass. Treatment for people that has found that they have autism or other neurotypical conditions. Finland has discovered that they have psychiatric disorders and development difficulties. And that may predispose a young person to this idea of gender dysphoria. One plausible explanation for why transgender identified teenagers exhibit such high rates of suicide ideation and behaviour, then, is that minors, teenage girls particularly, with pre-existing mental health problems, including suicidality, are more likely to identify as trans. Trans is a symptom, not a cause. The idea of trans is a symptom, but they can't have that mind. That trans child's got to exist as a complete identity, a real thing, right? With the same immutability as being homosexual. This is very interesting, isn't it? They use what's called a minority stress model. They're saying that, in essence, mental health problems are because of a minority stress model, which is something, again, they've nicked from the gay community. Right? They can't help themselves. They have to piggyback on everything. Even the research, everything from research to what's been known about homosexuality and what happens when it's illegal for years, they've nicked it because that's what they do. The Dutch model argues that we should be treating the comorbidities and whatever else is going on, i.e. what else is, forget gender identity, what else is going on in your life, before you do anything else, whereas the American affirmation model and those in the UK and Europe who are pushing the affirmation model are saying, no, don't do that, immediately affirm. I think I might be a girl. Oh, come on, we'll go to H&M. No, right, no affirmation socially, thank you very much. So, feminine gay kids, I can't get my head around this. It just makes me so sad. Makes me so sad. But back in August, right, in response to criticisms from this very newspaper I'm reading the article from, of its anti-scientific approach, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, assured the public that the vast majority of gender dysphoric minors need the exact opposite of drugs and surgeries. That's what they said, the exact opposite. Unfortunately, it wasn't backed up by the facts, which is that 2/3 of the youth referred to Seattle's Children's for gender issues were put on hormones. 2/3. They will lie because they are the enemy. They will lie. Okay? It's a difficult one. In the UK, I think what saved us is the NHS, because they report to us, don't they? Because we pay. America, you've got a capitalist model of medicine to a certain degree, and, you know, it's easy to get away with the fairies on that, isn't it? There's a woman at Yale School of Medicine called Meredith McNamara, and what Meredith McNamara of Yale School of Medicine has said is she denied that any meaningful change is taking place in Europe. I disagree that international guidelines are more conservative, she said, and don't see any substantive difference between American and European paediatric gender medicine. They lie. She said the National Health is just merely gathering evidence moving forward. That is not what the National Health is doing. That is not what the National Health is doing. You know, nobody knows whether she's ignorant or whether he or she is ignorant or just lying. How do we know? We can't tell, can we, half the time? It was, you know, very, very similar. They're seeing this in Florida with a child psychiatrist called Aaron Jansen has said that the Dutch model, which is the watchful waiting approach, is the only one that worked. But even then, when you look at what they're doing, that they're calling the Dutch model, they found no evidence whatsoever of anything like the months-long psychiatric assessment that the Dutch model calls for. And medical youth transition being steamrolled through as usual. This worrying trend means that anyone who questions the affirmative model is seen as a monster, because the affirmative model essentially says that whatever medical necessity is needed of drugs and surgeries for minors, that it will be done by the wishes of the teenager. The wishes of the teenager. This is not medicine. Okay, this is not first you do no harm. This is something else. So McNamara put in the New Journal of England Journal of Medicine recently, calls for legal and medical experts to fight for unfettered access to hormones and surgeries. Unfettered access. These people need jailing. She says that the legal coercive power could be used to stop science denialism. She is exactly the opposite of what she's saying, by which she means efforts to get the US to conduct systematic reviews of evidence and base medical care on the findings of those reviews are anti-science. She is what she's accusing them of being. She thinks that by, wanting to know what's going on really, that's anti-science. Queering. Pure queering. But when she writes that stuff, when they write all this stuff, because they produce, literary effluent at a rate of knots, and then it, clogs up American journals, and they have sensitivity readers in some some universities these days. They read it and go, no, you can't have that because it might trigger a twat, right? So they have sensitivity readers, right? As if you're responsible for somebody else's emotional condition. You're not, right? And you're not their support animal either, no matter what their emotional condition is. If you can't handle the battle of the day, whatever it may be, go home. Right, so this business with, let's look at trigger warnings. They need to do it the opposite way around. Let's look for queer bullshit. Let's look for gender bullshit. Because it's there. It'll be there. It's hidden between the lines. Last night when I was with my warrior teachers, we did a great analysis of a movie, right? And we could see what was hidden between the lines in that. These people hide this stuff, and you need to understand where it is. Have a look at the article. I think it's really good. It took me a couple of times to get my head around what was going on, but it's a nice explanation of where we are. Gender identity doesn't exist. It is personality. Gender identity doesn't exist. It is personality. Keep repeating that. Gender identity doesn't exist. It's personality. And gender expression is fashion. Right? What you're living is kind of, some sort of trashy Devil Wears Prada nightmare of cross-dressing. Right? Gender identity doesn't exist. Gender expression is fashion. That's the saying for today. Go well, good people.